We love to talk about our thick skin in this industry and in each of our careers. We brag about the dark humor, the stoicism, and our ability to look straight into the jaws of a complete disaster, fix it, and then be ready to go eat lunch like nothing happened. But let's stop lying to ourselves. That hard exterior isn't a shield, it's a vault. And every single nightmare call you run, every broken body you pull out of a wreck, and every dead child you couldn't save gets locked inside that vault with you. You think you're keeping the world safe from the chaos, but the truth is you're just trapping the poison inside of your own skin until it starts corroding your marriage, your mind, and your will to stay alive. The system treats us like disposable shock absorbers. They exploit our grit until we start to leak, and then they act shocked when an elite operator hits a wall. But our guest today took the absolute worst, most haunting memories of his 20-year career, ripped them out of the vault, and forced the entire world to look at the blood on our hands and the ghost in our heads. Welcome back to A Silent War Within. I'm Kevin Witzel, and today we are tearing the filter completely off the microphone. Daniel Sundahl, known everywhere as Dansun, spent 2 decades bleeding out the miles as a full-time advanced care paramedic and firefighter in Canada. When the cumulative trauma finally redlined his system, he didn't check a corporate box or suffer in a quiet corner. He weaponized his flashbacks. He began staging and photographing the exact same traumatic scenes that were trapped in his memory, and digitally painting over them to show the world the invisible demons that hover over first responders on the street. Today, he is a brutal, honest voice on post-traumatic growth, an international speaker, a published author, and he's added a few extra letters to his name that we'll get to in just a few minutes. And he uses this platform and he uses everything that he does to pull the elite operators, to pull the people that are in the meat grinder, if you will, to pull them out. Dan, you have exposed a raw nerve of what this job actually costs a human being. And you're proving we don't have to die in silence. I'm incredibly honored to have you at our table today. So let's get into it. And really, I think I picked the wrong attire because this shirt looks pretty wrinkled on camera. So hopefully that will smooth out.
See, now, Kevin, now that you brought attention to it, it's okay. Now you brought attention to it. You brought it out to the front. Everyone knows. And now it's okay. So it's all right.
This is Daniel Sundahl, and just recently he added another title, some letters to your name, right? Tell us about that a little bit.
I did, yeah. So for about 2 years now, I was a paramedic firefighter up here in Canada for 20 years. Retired, I think maybe 4 years ago now, 4 or 5 years ago. Went back to school, and now I'm a registered counseling therapist, specializing in trauma, in substance abuse and addiction, secondary to trauma, and relationship issues secondary to trauma. It's kind of the focus of my practice now. And most of my clients are first responders. So I feel that I'm EMS adjacent or first responder adjacent. So I'm still working along our peers, but just in a different supportive role. And I love it. It was the perfect transition for me after 20 years of working on the street. It was a good change for me.
Yeah. So do you want me to call you Daniel, or do you go by just Dan, or how do you prefer to be?
Daniel's kind of whatever you start with. Sometimes I feel like I'm not cool enough to be a Dan. I'm definitely not a Dan. I'm not cool enough to be a Dan. I'm not young enough to be a Danny. So I think I'm like a Daniel. But if you start calling me Dan, I'm okay with that too.
Yeah.
My family calls me Daniel because they're just too lazy to say Daniel. So, but no, whatever, Kevin, whatever, Dan or Daniel's fine.
I love that. I love that. Well, I'll go with
sign
Daniel,
my birthday cards that way. Okay, that sounds great.
Oh, yeah, no, that's perfect. So guys, if you've been on the street any length of time, you kind of have seen this man's artwork. So I just want to jump right into it and kind of let you explain what your artwork is and how you do it, because I think this is the very interesting part that I didn't know until doing some research about how this artwork is actually formed.
Yeah, so the artworks, I started doing it back in 2014 is when I started. And that was when I was first diagnosed with PTSD. And as part of my therapy, my psychologist at the time recommended that I use the hobby that I had of photography. And I understand the concept and why he was doing it now as a therapist myself. But he recommended that I stage and photograph and create the artwork that I did currently with photography as a way to process some of the feelings or the events that we were talking about. And I thought that's a dumb idea. Why would I want to do that? Like, why would I want to step deeper into this stuff? I'm like, I'm here to forget this stuff. And he's like, no, Daniel, that's not how it works. You gotta step into it. You need to emote this stuff and let it out. And I'm like, oh, so I did. I thought one of the calls that we were talking about, I staged it with my peers, photographed it, and then digitally drew and painted on top of that photograph, uh, recreating not necessarily what I saw, but how I felt about that call. And it was very emotional. And that's why I kind of put in the ghosts and the devils representing trauma and angels representing recovery. And he was right. When I was done, I no longer had, I could remember that event without having the emotional response to it. Because when I processed it while I was doing the artwork, I was able to reconsolidate where that memory sat in my brain. And now when I remembered that call, I remembered that art piece, which didn't have an emotional attachment to me. And so he was right. It worked. And I had a whole Rolodex of calls that I needed to process. So I started creating all this artwork. And it was very therapeutic for me. Initially, I was never intending on sharing it with anybody. And I think the reason why so many of our peers connect with the artwork because it's really authentic. I don't censor it because if I did, or I don't censor it, or I don't think, okay, what are people going to like, or what's the shock value? If I did, then it's not therapeutic for me to do it that way. But the more authentic that I am, the more therapeutic it is for me, and the more authentic the image is, the more I think it connects to my peers. Eventually, I did decide to start sharing it. The first few that I did, I'm like, yeah, I was a bit nervous about sharing them because I thought I would get a lot of negative backlash from other paramedics and first responders. Because it showed the very first one was they're in the back of the ambulance and there is this patient on the stretcher with the sheet over him. There's a ghost of the patient that's in the airway seat, which is weird. The paramedic has his gloved hands on his face, which is really weird and really disgusting. Right.
That's gross.
But I did that on purpose, right? Because I was trying to express kind of how I felt about that specific event. And I thought, I'm not going to share this with anybody because other paramedics are going to look at it and just think, what are you doing? Like, this is just
Mm,
the stupidest thing. But when I shared it, the exact opposite happened. So many other people connected with it. I did get lots of negative feedback as well, but I was overwhelmed with the positive feedback I got from it. And that really kind of encouraged me to continue to, I was always creating the artwork as my own therapy, but that really kind of encouraged me to share the artwork. And then it really changed my life. Really, I've traveled all around the world and have exhibits everywhere and speak and talk about the artwork. And yeah, it really changed my life.
yeah, I have many of your art pieces in my office at work. I manage a pediatric and neonatal critical care team, and I'm a paramedic myself by background. But one of the things that I always wondered, I'm glad I got you here on the show so I can ask. So, was this just all from your thoughts about yourself? I mean, where did artwork begin for you? Because this, even some of the very early work does not look like something that was done by somebody who has no background in this. So where did this art piece come from for you? Um, kind of in your journey.
Yeah, I was always a creative kid. I actually have in my house here, I have I'm lucky that my mom kept it when I was in grade 2, I think. She's kept a art folder that I created. And as a therapist myself now, I'm like, God, if I saw a 6-year-old kid create this artwork, I'd be like, this kid needs therapy or something. Like there's something messed up with it, right? So I've always been a really creative person. Always, I've always been really creative, and I'm really lucky that my mother really encouraged that in me to be creative. I'm a musician as well. I play guitar, so I was very creative, and I got into photography. I really like the photography part because it's very technical. I'm a bit of a geek as well, so I like the technical component of computers and photography, digital photography, and editing and then the creativity part of photography as well. So before I got diagnosis, before I started, having some pretty severe symptoms of trauma, I was creative before that, and I was doing similar looking artwork, but of architecture or landscapes or pictures of my bulldog and that kind of stuff. And my psychologist, as I recognize now, as I do with my own clients, are like, "Hey, what are your hobbies? What do you like to do?" And we try to link that to a form of therapy, a creative side. So because we're using a different part of the brain. So I was creating similar looking images before but like no one cared about digital paintings of my bulldog. Like, no, and I didn't really share a lot of that
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah.
But when I shared other things that were related to our profession and other people related their own experiences to it, that's kind of when it really, really blew up. So I guess I've always been a creative person at a really young age.
Very much so, and there's one of your pictures that I keep, um, kind of I kinda have your book completely open, and I've got these it's silly, but I've got these little chip clip the little mini chip clip holders to hold the pages open. I keep it, on my kinda display desk there. I have kind of a display area with all my knickknacks and goodies that I've collected over the
Hmm.
years, my coins and all that stuff. And there's one particular picture, and I told you this before we started recording, but I was just watching a podcast that you did today, just doing general research and things like that, and found this one and watched the entire thing. But one of the pictures that I've kept up for so very long is the Vegas Strong picture.
Yeah.
And I don't think I
Yeah.
knew the full background of that picture, that there is I can't remember if it was a sheriff or a sheriff's deputy, but he lost his life in the Vegas shooting,
Hmm.
and you put him in that picture. And after knowing that, I'm gonna go back to work and look at that picture a little bit differently now that I know that. So I guess
Hmm.
to kind of form all that thought into more of a question is where did this I don't know if you'd call it spiritual, but obviously there's spiritual characteristics in your picture. Where did that part come from for you?
Yeah. A lot of people ask me that, and I'm not quite sure what to say. I guess I was born and raised Catholic. So that was a
Okay.
core belief that was in my brain. Now as like someone who's very interested in childhood development and behavioral, science, I can see how when you're 0 to 7 or 0 to 11 years old, stuff that you experience as when we're kids has a lasting impression for the rest of our lives. Right? I'm not a practicing Catholic now, but when I was born and raised in that environment, that left a lasting impression on me. I am very spiritual. When I'm trying to portray an idea or trying to portray an emotion, um, that's when I utilize spirits and devils. Sometimes people don't like seeing devils in my artwork sometimes, but it's there with purpose. Everything in my artwork is very purposely placed. And I use devils to represent trauma, and angels to represent recovery. And the spirits that I put in are either spirits of the clients or patients that I've had, or spirits of family members of the patients. And it depends on what concept I'm trying to get across. So for that one, for the Vegas Strong, which I was able to use uh, Charles's family's permission to before I decided to do that. I did get his wife's permission to do that so that he can stand there to be part of that group portrait, which was, by the way, the most powerful group portrait I've ever done. And I've done lots of big group portraits of first responders. I'm lucky that I have the opportunity to travel and do that. But that group portrait was done less than 2 weeks after the shooting. And it's a portrait that we had planned to do even before. It was during EMS World when I was in Las Vegas. And we had planned to do this big group portrait of first responders there anyways. And then the shooting happened, and I asked them, "Hey, do you guys still want to do this?" And they're like, "Yeah, absolutely, more so than ever." And yeah, that was a big deal. That was the first responders that were there. Some of them that were there, all the people in the photo were there, and I think it was the first time that any of them were together because there was six or seven different services there, EMS, fire, and police or law enforcement. That's probably the first time ever that they've been together in a non-emergency situation. 100% since the shooting. And to just see them come together in a non emergency situation, to just feel the energy around that, it was very now as a therapist, I'm thinking, wow, that was really therapeutic for everybody to just be there uh, in commonalities that they had of that experience. And, it was really the sense of community and camaraderie that I experienced there was just so great. So yeah, that was a really, I know, man, it was so hot there, dude. That was such a hot day when we did that photo session.
Yeah, I bet.
So
It's hot
God,
out
my
there.
my camera actually overheated. It was so hot. But yeah, so that was an incredible experience, and the feelings or the energy around that photo shoot was great. And yeah, I think adding the ghost was, or the spirit was really, it enhances the whole idea of why I was doing the photo in the first place. So I do utilize spirits, and there's a lot of things in it that people often don't see the first time when they look at my artwork. And the reason I put those things in there isn't for, where's Waldo? Like, can you see the thing? Can you find the ghost? A lot of my images don't have that. It's very purposeful when I put things in there to portray the idea or the emotion that I'm trying to illustrate in the artwork.
It's absolutely amazing. Obviously, I'm a huge fan. But one of the things you mentioned, and I think Vegas is a really good example because um, many people, not just that were responders there, but also people that were um, attendees of that concert, obviously are still dealing with some of the fallout from that. Something that you mentioned is that many times we have this kind of a Rolodex of all these calls that we kind of, because of the culture that we live in, we tend to stuff down. We don't want to deal with them, where we have this unreal, not expectation, but this unreal response that just says, I'm fine, because that's what we've always done. That's what we've seen everybody else do. And I think you talk about that in your book, and we'll get into that in just a minute. But one of the things that I think, just to go back and give some background on you. So we're talking what, 2014, when you finally realized that, hey, this is this Rolodex, this is this post traumatic stress that I'm having. Like, how did that come about that kind of becomes the catalyst for this photography art career, that you built? Can you talk about that just a little bit?
Yeah, it was like the 2014 was when I was first diagnosed with PTSD. So there was several years prior to that I started feeling the symptoms. So I became a full-time advanced care paramedic and firefighter in 2003 is when I started doing that full time.
Wow.
So that was, and so by 2014, I'd been in it. The symptoms started coming probably 7 or 8 years in, but I didn't recognize what it was. So I didn't really know what was happening, because for me, I had accumulative stress. I didn't have acute post traumatic stress, where for me, it wasn't the one call. And I felt, man, after that call, I feel different. Like, this is the one call that essentially impaired me mentally and physically. But so for me, it was very gradual. It was several years of constant stressors that eventually impaired me, and I didn't know that was a thing. So a lot of the symptoms that I had are very, very common symptoms of trauma that, is now very well known, thanks to, podcasts like yours, where there's a lot of awareness that's going on now, which is fantastic. But back in 2014, it really wasn't,
Mm.
that wasn't around. We didn't really talk about it that much. And so I didn't really know. And kind of how it started, I was at work on shift, and the city I worked for hired the psychologist to come talk about post traumatic stress, which I think was pretty forward thinking when I think of it now. And it wasn't just for the firefighters, it was for everybody. And so our captain said, okay, we're gonna go listen to this guy talk about mental health. And we're all like, well, God, we're gonna listen to this guy talk about mental health. And so we went and we listened to this guy talk about mental health, and he started talking about how many of his clients he diagnosed with PTSD because of this um, gradual stress. And he started showing all of the symptoms of trauma. And as he's going through all these different symptoms of trauma, I'm like, holy crap, like I saw a lot of that in myself, like difficulty sleeping, agitation, isolation, not wanting to sit in the corner of a room, a lot of these hunger, weight gain, all these different things that I recognize. Oh, a lot of this stuff was me, but I never thought that it could have been because of my job. I just thought, I'm kind of having a bad day today, and tomorrow will be better. But I just never really got that way. So after he did that presentation, I really started thinking like, holy crap, like maybe this isn't normal for me to be feeling this way. And went back to the fire hall and I asked everybody, my coworkers, my other firefighters, I'm like, hey, what'd you guys think of that presentation? Did you relate to any of it? And they're like, no, no, not at all. I'm like, yeah, no, me neither. Absolutely not. Right. So the next day I phoned, of course, right? And I wouldn't be surprised if the other guys there were feeling the same way I was, but we just weren't going to admit it at the time. So I phoned, made an appointment, and got assessed with PTSD. I was shocked that I had it. I had no idea I had it. And that's when I started getting therapy. And then that was how it started with, and it's difficult. It's not like when you break your leg, let's say if you have a mid femur fracture, okay, there's designed and known techniques to repair that in surgery. This is the surgical technique we're going to use to fix, mend a broken femur fracture. For people who break their mind through trauma, yes, there's known techniques that may or may not work for most people or some people. But part of the tricky part of being a therapist and being a trauma therapist is we need to find the thing that works best for the individual. Because often the trauma in my experience now as a therapist, is that the trauma that has come forward, yes, it can be from the traumatic work that we do as first responders, but it's often linked to other traumas even before we became first responders. And often those previous traumas are why we became first responders in the first place. So now we start doing this deep dive into this really interesting stuff of, adverse childhood experiences. And, are you more resilient because of these traumatic experiences, or are you less resilient because of these traumatic experiences? And how is that related? I love it. I absolutely love it, about the work I'm doing now for therapy. But when my therapist went through that, or the psychologist went through that, and we figured out, okay, this is a way that's going to help you process these situations or these feelings. And we discovered that for me, it was being creative, right? So for other people, it could be doing stuff in the body, because trauma is definitely held in the body in many ways. So it's either exercise or taking up a new sport, or being creative in other ways, learning a new instrument, lots of different things, of processing it and having to reconsolidate where the memory is, so it can be moved to a spot where you can remember the event without having the emotional response, so that your midbrain doesn't think, oh man, this is happening all over again, and all the hormones are going, and you feel like you're there again, even though it's been, well, sometimes even decades later in some cases.
One of the things that make you so unique, not just as a person, but also as an artist and now a counselor, is the fact that not only do you hold those titles, but you're also very much viewed as one of us. So all of that cumulative trauma that you dealt with and you went through, and you kind of started to process, how does that change the way you approach counseling with a first responder?
Oh, it's huge. It's like, what was that commercial where it's like, what was that commercial where the guy's, he's like, I think it's for baldness or hair growth or something. He goes, I'm not only a, I'm not only a whatever, but I'm also a client, or I can't remember what that is, but it was,
Well, it's
I'm not
like
only the,
Bozeman hair replacement or something.
yeah, right.
Yeah,
It's like,
yeah,
I'm not
mhm,
only the owner, but I'm a client as well. But yeah,
yeah.
that is massive. Like that is a really big, so for someone like, I've been there, I had PTSD. It was bad. I was suicidal. I had a plan and everything, and I recovered. And I'm now in the post traumatic growth phase where I can look back and I'm better because of that experience. So I've lived that personally, and now going back to school, spending several years psychoanalyzing myself of what actually happened, I have a clear understanding for me of how that recovery process happened and how it can happen for many other people based on the neurobiology of the brain and how trauma works and the body, where it's either cognitive, emotional, or physical. And so I have a really good understanding of how that happened. And I have a good understanding of how people can recover from it. And we can recover from it. Lots of people have. To be a first responder, and I am still registered as an advanced care paramedic. I don't work on the car anymore, but I can't tick that little box that says, do you want to let your registration? I'm like, no, it's worked too hard to do it. I can't do it.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
I still spend the money to stay registered. And luckily where I'm from, they know that I'm not working on cars, so I can stay registered based on all the mental health stuff I'm doing. So I'm really lucky that way. But yeah, so when I have a client and they know what, they don't have to explain to me, they don't have to explain to me the lingo. Like they don't. I understand what it's like. I understand the situation. A big part of the therapeutic process, and studies tell us that one of the most effective uh, elements of successful treatment is what we call the therapeutic alliance, which is the relationship between the client and the therapist. Doesn't matter how many letters you have behind your name, doesn't matter even how much experience you have. It's what's the connection like between the therapist and the person that's seeking help. That is the most determining factor. And for me, I'm very lucky and very I am very grateful that a lot of my clients come to me because they know me through my artwork. So they already know what I stand for. They kind of already know what I'm about. So when they come into my office and they're sitting across from me, we've already established that therapeutic alliance is like, hey, I get it. Like I've been there. I understand. I get it. And I know how to get you out of it as well. Once that is felt that way, the people that go to therapy, part of the process of recovering is really being vulnerable enough to process the emotions that they're having. And if people aren't feeling vulnerable enough to do that, then it's not going to happen. So a lot of that, the first few sessions for me is helping my clients feel safe enough with me that they can be vulnerable enough to go there. It's really hard to be, if not impossible, to be in the fight or flight response and be vulnerable at the same time. Which when I do a lot of stuff with the couples, that's a problem too, because sometimes you can't be connecting enough. You can't be vulnerable enough to connect. And then we get into the parasympathetic. I know a lot of people that are listening will understand where the parasympathetic nervous system, we're all calm and we're chill and we're relaxed. Oxytocin's flowing, and we're feeling really connected, and serotonin's going. We're feeling really connected and open, but in some ways we're a bit vulnerable too because we're open up to connection. If we're hypervigilant and in the sympathetic nervous system all the time, it's difficult for us to open up enough to be vulnerable for the recovery to happen. So it's important for me that my clients connect with me as their therapist through understanding and support and validation for them to get that recovery to happen so they can feel safe. They can let their guard down. And I tell them, hey, you don't have to be fight or flighty here. Like this is, and I don't know if you can see my bulldog Dexter in the background there. He's a
Oh, yeah.
3.5-year-old, 65-pound pig of a dog who is great. So I have a home office. People come in and Dexter is there and he's very responsive to people's emotion, and people just feel really safe, right? They can feel really safe. And when they feel that, then the healing can happen. So I recommend anyone that's going to therapy to seek out a therapist that either has a lot of experience working with, not even, well, for us, yeah, for first responders, so they kind of understand the work environment. Sometimes there's toxic workplaces or sanctuary trauma. That can be very effective. Like that's very significant where trauma is in place as well. So we don't have to explain the lingo, don't have to explain, the work schedule. Um, So someone that is either has a lot of experience working with first responders or was a first responder themselves in the past and is now a therapist is very helpful in getting that therapeutic alliance
Mhm.
up and going early so that recovery can happen.
And I think that's really next step for me because that's what I want to do is go get um, my licensed practical counselor here, which is, man, there's only one. No, there's two. There's two first responder specific counselors just in the Memphis area, which that's where we broadcast from is Memphis. So we're a pretty large town with thousands of responders that are likely suffering from something that they could benefit from this. But when you were talking, a question hit me. Were you ever truly concerned about having to overcome the hurdle of what could be the fandom of kind of what Dansun is?
Kevin, it still freaks me out a little bit, because when I go to like EMS, one of these really big conferences,
Hmm.
and I usually have a table and stuff. I'm like, and people come up and I love it. Don't get me wrong. I love it how people are, what my artwork means to them and how they connect to it. Like that's
Absolutely.
like I'm blown away by it because it's very personal to me when I create it. So when that happens, I'm really overwhelmed, and I'm very happy, and I feel great that that kind of stuff happens. And but yeah, and I was never planned to go out and do, you know, be a famous artist. That wasn't my plan. I just was, it was my own healing recovery. I play guitar too, and that's part of it. But no one cares about my guitar playing because I'm not that good at it. No one connects to it, right? So
Yeah.
nobody cares. But yeah, no, I love it. It just changed my life.
That's awesome. Is he okay?
See,
He
when I look at him, see, look at
he's
this, I look
just
at him.
like, "What?"
Dexter, what are you doing? He's got an itch that he can't scratch. That's when he does
Yeah.
that.
Mhm.
Dexter, come here. I know he's a funny dog. He's like a little person.
Yeah,
Yeah, no, he's
absolutely.
okay.
Um, and speaking of Dexter, this is a really good kind of transition point now that Dexter's having a fit back there.
Yeah.
Um, one of the things that hooked me really the most about Unstuck, is the fact that that very first story that you tell is about walking Dexter, and this guy comes by and kinda you feel judged a little bit. And the way you kinda went through that, I thought to myself, wow, this is I could technically do this to myself because I struggle with this. I always am putting thoughts into other people's heads and assigning this blame to myself, I guess, almost if I see somebody look at me a certain way or say a certain thing, I'm like, oh, they meant that, this way or that way. And kind of watching how you for lack of better terminology, shrink yourself in that moment and kind of knew what was going on. One of the things I think the book pulls out extremely well, and I am going to cheat and actually read this off of my sheet because there's no way I'm going to remember all of this. Um, I think this neurobiology term, which I've heard, numerous times, but you talk about a few very specific things in your book that I want you to get into. So this um, default mode network
Yes.
that's in your book and explains the science behind those um, chaos points and kind of what we do to ourselves and kind of this scanning for threats all the time, and we're
Hmm.
always in this kind of activated mental state. And I think that really, and you talk about this too, but we fall into what I kind of termed, and I think you termed a few times, is kind of this boredom trap. The quiet room is absolutely
Yeah.
torture for us.
Yeah. I do a lecture on it, which is really interesting. It's really fun, on embracing boredom, I call it. It's all about default mode network stuff.
Tell us about
Yeah.
some of the neurobiology that you talk about in this default mode network and why the quiet spaces are so scary for us.
Yeah. So God, I do this whole lecture on it, and when I was doing the research on it, it's really fascinating. And as an addiction and substance abuse counselor, I've noticed that there's a connection there for first responders, uh, not feeling comfortable with being bored, and substance abuse and addiction. So there's the default mode network is what your brain does when nothing else is going on, right? The monitors that we have on the ambulances you have to recharge the batteries, right? You can't just run them all the time. You got to take the batteries out. They need to sit in the charger, and they need to just sit there and charge, unless you have one of the charging ones in the ambulance where it charges automatically. But when the monitor's not being used. So our brain is kind of similar, right? When our brain isn't being used, it recharges. So when we're people like us that are hypervigilant or first responders, or I call them sensitive seeking individuals, um, or sensation seeking individuals, it never turns off, even when they sleep, right? So it's like having a monitor on all the time and not being able to recharge the batteries. Or if you think of, the robot vacuums that happen, that kick in when everyone goes to sleep. Now the vacuums
Mhm.
go out and clean everything up. That's kind of what your default mode network is. And a few things happen if we let our default mode networks activate. And I call it embracing boredom. That's actually going to be the topic of my next book, is this subject alone. And when we let ourselves essentially relax or let ourselves recharge, there's a few things that happen. People probably recognize this. So when you have, when you're trying to think of a name of someone, like, oh, what's that actor's name? I can't
Mhm.
remember. And you're thinking about it and you're thinking about it, and then you stop thinking about it, then it pops into your brain. That's default mode network, right? When you're not thinking about it, then you're actually open to intuitive thoughts, right? So that's one thing that it does if you let yourself go there. It's also really good for introspective thinking, which is very helpful for us. It's also really good for creativity, right? When you think, another thing, when you're in the shower, right? You get some people, I get the best ideas ever when I'm in the shower, is because you're concentrating on cleaning yourself. And so your brain is focused on one thing. So all these other things can actually come in. And then it's also really good for cleaning up your brain, right? Then your mitochondria and everything have time to fix stuff and clean the dust away and stuff, because now it has time. It's not spending time and energy on the thoughts that we're having. There's a few significant things that it does. And what I ask people to do, and at first responders, man, they hate this. When I do this lecture, I start off with 5 minutes of nothing. I say, put everything down on the table. Just don't, like, no computers, nothing. Put everything off the table, no distractions, and just sit there for 5 minutes. Drives them nuts. They did a study on
Well, it
this,
would me for
right?
sure. Oh
They did a
my.
study on this where it was at a university. So mind you, the participants were mostly university age students, but they put men and women in a room, like just one person in a room, and just said, okay, sit here and do nothing. Just think about yourself or have introspective thoughts. If you get bored, hit this button. If you hit this button, you're going to get electrocuted. Like, you're going to get a shock. So in the men, 67% of the men couldn't sit longer than like 6 or 7 minutes before they went and hit the button. One guy hit the button 190 times. He's just like, no way, I need stimulus. So the
Yeah.
idea is women were much better. They could sit in their thoughts for a bit longer. I think it was don't quote me on these. I think it was only 33% of them did it. But the idea is that a lot of people that are sensation seeking, they would prefer to even have negative stimulus than to sit there and do nothing and allow their default mode network to actually mop up and do the cleaning and allow for creativity and good ideas to come in. They were like, no, it has to be active all the time, to the point where I'd actually rather have negative stimulus. So the research I'm reading now, and it's really fascinating, is that people that don't like to be bored, first responders, um, they have a higher risk of substance abuse and addiction, meaning, hey, I'm just bored. So, hey, I'm going to surf porn because I'm bored, or hey, I'm going to do drugs just because I'm bored. I need some stimulation. Um, I clearly have nothing against tattoos, but that also can be projected as, I need stimulus. So a lot of paramedics and first responders that I talk to that have tattoos are like, yeah, I like tattoos because it makes me feel something. Okay, what are you going to do when you run out of skin? Then I'm going to get them removed. Okay, well, that's going to hurt even more. But it's really interesting of allowing your default mode network to kick in and relax. And then one of the later chapters in my book, I talk about, peace versus happiness, and being at peace, which is like, think of happiness as like a cat, right? A cat, if you chase a cat, it's going to run away. But if you just sit there, the cat's probably going to come up and, cuddle up on you. So if you think of cat as happiness, if you can achieve peace through mastering your default mode network, a lot of people do this through meditation. They do it through, yoga, or a lot of mindful ways. It really helps peace to come into your life. And I go through this in the book, and I practice it myself. And a lot of my clients do it, where, this is probably going to freak you out a little bit. So here's what I recommend, right? To activate your default mode network. Don't bring your phone to the gym. And like, what are you talking about? Like, well, of course
Yeah,
I can.
right.
Like, yeah, don't. You can bring your phone to the gym, but don't bring it to you in the gym. So you're not scrolling stuff all the time. Don't, when you're in the car, don't listen to music. Just listen, nothing. Just drive with nothing. People are like, oh, that would drive me crazy. If you think the iPhone, I think, came out in 2007.
Yeah.
So you think before 2007, yeah, sure, we had those realistic or Motorola flip phones, but they weren't like handheld computers. Before 2007, which really wasn't that long ago, nobody was on their phone, right? Because they didn't have them. People had no problem doing nothing, right? There's just standing in line. You just stand in line. You don't flip out your phone. And if you look at statistics of anxiety and depression, since that time, they've definitely gone up. There's another interesting study where stimulus with your fingers, so and stuff that you're doing on your phone, actually decreases the cortical thickness of the part of your brain that makes you decide what you should and shouldn't do. So like its risk behavior actually lessens by using digital stimulus all the time, which is really, and I'll quote all these surveys. And if you want, I can send you those links so people that are listening, they can reference those studies. If you want me, I can give
Absolutely.
you those links.
Yes. Yes.
And yeah, it's really interesting stuff. So the default mode network is something that I think could be very significant for first responders, that they can try to help practicing to actually make them more resilient, to bring them more peace in their lives, and to potentially lessen the potential of substance abuse and addiction. I know that's a big statement, but a lot of the research that I'm doing now is showing that, which is really interesting.
No, I think that, and this book, and I jumped on the early bandwagon and got one of the early copies,
Hmm.
and I started reading this book, and like I said, the first story about Dexter had me hooked because I do that. And as I'm reading through it, yeah, I don't know if this was your purpose, but I really felt very singled out. I was like, "He wrote this about me." I feel very attacked.
Okay. Okay.
Um,
Well, it's true, Kevin. I did. I researched you, and it was all about you. The
yeah, I
entire book
know,
is about you. You're right.
I know, and my wife tells me all the time it's not all about me, which is a struggle. Um, but me and my counselor fight all the time because I've been in therapy for, I don't know, 3 or 4 years, and me and my counselor fight all the time about this, and we make a joke out of it, we laugh about it, but it really is. She wants me to slow down and sit in the quiet sometimes, and I'm just like, "That sounds particularly awful. Why
Hmm.
would you make me do that? That's torture." And she's like, "No, it's a start. You have to." And she accuses me all the time of putting too much on my plate. I just wanna be running all the time. I don't ever want that downtime. And I guess reading the book, I'm like, "Oh, it's because these quiet moments are the times that what he's talking about here has activated." And I have, even in previous marriage and before I started counseling, I would even go so far as to create chaos in my own home so that I could have that stimuli.
Exactly. So that's like
But
you pushing the button. You'd rather push the
yeah,
button and get the negative stimulus than to actually do
yes,
nothing, than have no
yes.
stimulus at all. Very
So
common in
plug,
first responders.
but plug for the book. This is one of the better books that I've read, and it wasn't just chocked full of all these. Um, doing this podcast, I have become a very avid reader, because we have a lot of authors that have come on our show that have authored books, and a lot of the books that you read are very much like memoirs. It's
Hmm.
war stories. And then you get into the mental health part of it after you tell the war stories. You didn't do as much of that, and I liked the fact that this was science based, but also one of the things that you said that was so just, I don't know. When I read it, I had to stop and go, "Oh, okay." Even though heard this particular phrase before, um, it really just struck me in a way that I had to stop for a second and remind myself, like, "Well, I'm not broken." And that's one of the things that you put in your book is like this adaptive brain that you talk about kind of throughout, does not mean that it's a broken one. Through your book, I think you set a huge precedence and a paradigm shift almost to say, "Hey, you're not broken," and, preach this message all the time. Um, but I had to learn it the hard way. I had to go through all that Rolodex of calls and didn't even realize the Rolodex was so deep until I got in therapy and started talking. And as we get through some stuff and do some EMDR, I started bringing up stuff from 10 years ago that I had no idea was even packed in there.
Yeah. No,
So
I love.
I don't think I knew the Rolodex was so thick.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, I really, that means a lot to me that you said that. That because I have, and it's not. I know the vernacular now is going toward, instead of post traumatic stress disorder, we want to call it post traumatic stress injury. And I've had this discussion with other counselors, and I'm like, I don't think it's an injury because your brain is doing what your brain is designed to do, right? Your brain isn't designed to make you happy. So if you're not happy, it doesn't mean that you're broken, right? Your brain is a survival organ and it's designed to run as efficiently as possible. If it means that the most efficient way is to be activating traumatic neural pathways that have probably been there since you were a kid, then your brain is happy. It's like, hey, we're staying alive. We're staying alive and we're being efficient. The job is done. It doesn't care if you like it or not. It doesn't care if you're happy, right? So the brain's job isn't to make you happy. If you're not happy, it doesn't mean your brain's broken, right? Or because you're suffering. And I know, God, other therapists that are listening to this, they're probably thinking, oh, Dan, you're so wrong. It is an injury because, well, I get it. But this is just my view of it. And as a first responder, the reason I introduce it that way is that we can be the architect of our own neurobiology through neuroplasticity. Your brain develops that way because of the experiences that we have. And we can, through accessing our prefrontal cortex, we can rewire the brain so that the brain now decides, okay, well, it's now easier and more efficient to go to a more peaceful, resilient neural pathway, which then leads to happiness for us instead of it going to these traumatic neural pathways that cause a lot of problems for us. And we can do that. We can change it. I guess the concept can also say, okay, if the brain is broken, then you can fix it through the same methods through neuroplasticity. But I don't think it's an injury. I don't think the brain it's not doing anything it wasn't designed to do in the first place. It's not a neurological malformation that's happened. It's just doing what it needs to do. And if we can discover what it is through EMDR, like EMDR is great. It balances the left and right side hemispheres. It reconsolidates the memories and puts them where they should go. So here's an example. When we have a traumatic event happen, the amygdala gets activated and the body's alarm system kicks off. It's like, okay, you're holding that memory. Like, we don't have time to process that memory because we got shit to do right now. Like, we are in that event right now. We don't got time to go file this memory away where it should be. Just drop it here. We got shit to do, right? Then you go into fight or flight, your epinephrine and all these things, your pupils get bigger, your heart rate goes up, your blood flow goes to your brain and your muscles. I'm like, okay, we don't got time to consolidate these memories. We got to fight this thing or run like hell to save our lives. The problem is when you come back to normal, that memory is still sitting there. So now that memory might be, when you remember it, you don't remember it as oh, I remember this. That memory is now, I remember it as an emotion. Then you have the emotion and then the whole thing starts off again because your midbrain doesn't have a concept of time. It thinks, oh, here's the emotion. It's happening all over again. Then it happens all over. That's how the brain just works. So what we can do with neuroplasticity is we can say, okay, we're going to move that memory, which is what EMDR does and a lot of other therapies. We're going to reconsolidate that memory so that we can put it in a spot where, okay, we can remember it without having the emotional response to it. It dumped that memory where it was because it prioritized your survival over processing that memory where it should go. So that's what the brain is designed to do.
And I think, for a long time after, and even after going to therapy and bringing all this stuff back up, there was a level of anxiety that came with the fact that I had talked about it. And
Hmm.
I don't know what that was. But it kind of hung around for a few weeks, especially after I had kind of what I call dumped and just really talked about all the things that bothered me. And now I've started writing a piece for a local news media company. They wanted me to do a day in the life of a paramedic, or memoirs of a paramedic, or whatever they'll entitle it. I don't know what they'll wind up entitling it, but um, even yesterday, sitting on the couch, and I was home with just me and my 5-year-old son, and he's back here playing, and I'm talking to my computer to write all this down, just as
Hmm.
I'm telling the story, as if I'm telling it to someone. And as I'm talking to my computer and talking to AI and telling it to don't change any of the wording, but put this, put the punctuation and all that, because I'm not great at that stuff. Um, Even telling these stories again, there was, kind of a level of, ooh, I don't like that. I don't like talking about this again. And it took me back to what I call the therapy couch, because my therapist actually has a couch,
Really? Oh. Do you actually
that
lay
I
on it?
actually
Or do you sit
no,
on do you,
no,
like,
it's
lie
I
down
just
on it?
sit on it. Yeah, no, it's like a frilly, pillows everywhere. It's a girl couch. I mean,
Okay.
it's a girl couch.
Okay, so it's not like a
Um,
Freudian, it's not like a psychoanalytical couch where you're sitting down and
no,
he's
no,
sitting
no,
up to
no,
your
no.
head.
It's
Okay, yeah.
it's a couch with the fringe pillows and all the
Yeah,
things,
like, so many pillows you can't even sit on it. Yeah,
yeah, and
I
she
get it.
fusses at me for moving her pillows, and I'm like, "Look, lady, I gotta I gotta sit down." But
Oh my god, we
yeah,
could talk about that, yeah. I
yeah,
love it.
how do you take that anxiety that naturally comes from some of these calls, and even the anxiety from having to talk about this stuff again, how do you take that anxiety and kind of, throw that neuroplasticity in reverse and say, "Wait a minute, I'm not in danger, I'm not."
Yeah, that's a
What's
really
that
good
look
question.
like in reality?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Anxiety is a fear of the future response. So for first responders, we think because of our past experiences, this is likely to happen again. So when we think of it potentially happening again, and it likely will happen again. If you're still working, especially if you're in a busy service, it gives you anxiety because it's a future fear, right? It's not a current present time, it's future of, okay, this is what might happen. Now I'm starting your brain stem and your midbrain or your emotional brain. When you think about it, it it starts to activate as if it's happening already. So now you're giving future events that haven't even happened that energy, and you start to feel bad. So the idea when we treat anxiety, um, is we're trying to keep people in the present moment. In my book, and I have a separate chapter on anxiety and depression, when I talk about the core value system, which is what I use,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
is
yeah.
the core value operating system, which my book outlines. It helps with anxiety when you recognize that you're having an anxious statement, right? So there's 4 steps to it. You recognize that you're feeling anxiety. Um, 2 is that you identify the core value that's being challenged. So a lot of times it could be, security for first responders. It's security or safety, because often many of us have this core belief of the world is, really dangerous. And I'm not saying that in some cases that is very true, depending on where you are and where you work and where you live. But if you check in with yourself, so the idea of not living in the future potential stressful event, using your core value and checking in. One, yes, I'm feeling very stressed, or I'm feeling this way, and identifying the feelings that you're having around that anxiety. Two, identifying the core value. And a lot of my clients or people that read the book, they have their core values on their phone. So it's easily accessible. Okay, this is the core value that's being challenged. And then use your statement, your action statement. So let's say, like for safety, it could be, my core value of safety is being challenged, but I practice my core value of safety by being diligent in my present moment, right? Because you can only be safety in the present, who you are right now. Depending on who you
Mhm.
are, you're going to have a different action statement for whatever core value is going to be. So the idea of doing is checking in with yourself with the core values is that it brings you to the present moment and checks in with yourself to the point it's like, hey, I'm in control of of how I'm feeling. You recognize, okay, I'm feeling anxious about this future potential event. So in my case, as a paramedic, pediatric calls, I
Mhm.
couldn't do them anymore. And a lot of my artwork you see as pediatric calls and kids in there. I didn't want to see suffering kids anymore. I couldn't do it. Right. I had anxiety of potentially seeing suffering kids again on my next call or the next day. And I didn't want to do that. And so I thought about it and it started stressing me out. So if I was my own therapist at that time, it would be about focusing and on the present moment by using the core values of like, okay, I'm feeling stressed about this potential thing that might happen in the future. I'm checking with myself right now. I'm safe in the current moment. I'm safe and I'm in control of my safety right now. So I'm okay. So I'm all right. And that mindfulness, being in the present moment, takes you out of future potential stuff, which causes anxiety, or past things that already happened that you haven't processed, which sometimes causes depression. And so it puts you into the current moment of self control, is really what it is. The core value operating system I go through my book is really self empowerment of realizing okay, I'm okay. I'm in control of what's this thing that potentially might happen in the future is activating my nervous system. No, no, I'm in control of who I am in the present moment, and I'm okay. I'm safe right now. I'm good. And then you do that enough, your nervous system, your brain will actually now start to use that as the normal neural pathway. And it actually decreases anxiety because your brain will automatically stop worrying about future stuff. Now, in our cases as paramedics, then yes, that might be the situation. So then we have to think, okay, what are we going to do about it? Right.
Mhm.
So now if your anxiety about is very legitimate, like very potentially real of, okay, well, yeah, I know I work in like you work with kids all the time. You're a
Mhm.
pediatric team, right? So if that started really upsetting you, well, then with the therapist, we can, okay, what are we going to do about it? And then we go to radical acceptance, which I love. Any situation you have where you have a decision to make or you don't know what to do, I know this oversimplifies very complex ideas. People with trauma, this it helps a little bit because it brings it into gives it a little bit of scaffolding to go from. But you essentially have four options. So let's say that happens to you, Kevin. You start getting really bad anxiety before you go to work, which is common to first responders. They're like, man, I hope I don't have a serious call tomorrow. And I probably will, because I don't know if I have the capacity to deal with it because my confidence is low and I'm feeling shitty even before. Um, there's a lot of things we can do there with trauma or reconsolidate and stuff. But let's say you have four options. This is radical acceptance. I love it. One, try to fix it. Right. So what a lot of people, first responders do, if pediatrics, so for me, I became a PALS instructor. That lowered my anxiety. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Right. So I studied
Yeah.
and I taught PALS. So next time I'm like, hey, no biggie. I do this stuff all the time. So it really lowered my anxiety of pediatrics by becoming a PALS instructor. So doing more training and so that it became less scary. So that's what I did. But try to fix it. Let's say you're in a job that you hate. You have a sanctuary toxic work environment. You can try to fix it by coming up with solutions or saying, hey, this is what's going on at work. This is how it's affecting people. Coming up with of solutions to leadership, like, hey, this is this place sucks and this is why, and this is how we can fix it. Option two of radical acceptance is learn to live with it. So you reframe it, or you can look at it in a different way. And sometimes that's really hard with trauma, especially if you're having a lot of cognitive distorted thought patterns. And this is kind of the realm of counseling and cognitive behavioral therapy. How can you look at things in a different way? Sometimes it's really hard if your brain is going to, if it's in, safety mode, it's kind of hard to even think different or see things in a different way. So sometimes people might need help with that. But let's say the same thing for a job that, let's say we'll use that example still of you at work. You can now reframe it as, okay, and now I'm going to work. I'm trading my time for money. And the reason I'm going to work now is I'm going to work to support my family. So it might make it easier for you to go to work. I'm like, look, I'm just here. I'm going to trade my time for money. And the money I get, I'm going to use toward my money or toward my family. And having that brain shift might help. Third option is leave. You can quit. And I know first responder, we don't like, because now you're telling me not to be who I am. Right. And
Right. Right.
that's like, well, no, I can't not be who I am, to the point where some emergency services, public safety personnel, first responders, they identify so strongly with that they would rather stay in that profession and become to the point where they're going to kill themselves versus actually leave, because the thought of leaving that job, they're so tied to their identity that if I'm not here, then what? Who am I? Like, that's a scary thing that they don't know. And as a therapist and many other therapists, I'm sure that work with first responders, they'll understand what I'm saying, that that's a big roadblock. And we have to do a lot of work with identity. So yeah, if your work is causing you that much anxiety that it's affecting your life and your health to the point where you're becoming suicidal, leave. Fourth option, which a lot of us do, is do nothing and suffer. Do nothing and suffer and hope things just get better on their own, right?
Yep. That's it.
Never do number four, right? But that's what most of us do. So I love radical acceptance theory of, okay, well, what are we going to do? This is the situation. What are you going to do about it? Here are your four options. And again, I understand that though that this way more complicated and nuanced than just narrowing it down to four simple things. But for people that are like, man, I don't know what to do, especially if they have anxiety or they have all this stuff that's going on and they have a lot of stresses in their lives and they can't make sense of anything. that may be helpful as, okay, how can we fix it? Let's start there. And we do that by, I get my clients to write down all their controllable and uncontrollable stressors. First, write down all your stressors. Write down all the things that are stressing you out. Then identify which ones you can control or eliminate and which ones you can't. The ones you can't eliminate, then we apply the radical acceptance. Okay, how can we fix it? Or how can we reframe it? Can we leave the situation that's causing it? But don't do forward, don't do nothing and suffer. And I think first responders like that because there's structure. Right? There's a little bit of structure to it. It's like, if this is what happens, this is what you do. If this is what you see, it's like protocol based. It's like a flow chart. This is what you see, do this. This is what you're experiencing, do this. It makes it a little bit easier.
So the last probably 15, 20 minutes with you, I mean, the whole thing's been fantastic, but I think the last 15, 20 minutes with you explaining some of these things that you write about in your book, which is excellent, by the way, is just, even for me, having gone through therapy, having gone through some of the things, still in therapy, try to take the best care of myself that I can. And I'm still, somewhat overweight and working on losing weight every day. But the last 15 minutes and then those chapters in the book to go along with it, were just, like I said, even from somebody who's kind of been through this journey as well, were just so eye opening. And if you guys feel the same way, I encourage you to leave a comment, whether you're listening on Spotify or Apple or wherever you're listening, or YouTube, leave a comment, to let us know that this resonated with you. Because with me personally, this stuff has just been great to be reminded of many times in therapy. We get so far down that you have that relationship with your therapist when, you walk in, you talk about work, you talk about your family, you talk about all those things, but some of those core values, you don't forget them, but you just kind of push them to the back of your brain and, you bring them up when it's convenient and that's fine. But sometimes being slapped in the face with it, like your book did to me, um, is great. I mean, s- using the metaphor slapped in the face makes it sound negative, but really it really is sometimes just a slap in the face. You're like, oh yeah, I do remember, the first weeks of therapy learning about some of these things and going, oh yeah. And one of the biggest, and I've said this probably, I would guess on every show, but one of the biggest things for me, and I think the podcast I was listening to that you did previously, and this was about a year ago, you made mention of, like, if we make our brains believe that we are smart, that we are good, that we are these positive things, our biological system starts to follow that. And we begin to believe that. And I think that was one of the biggest things my therapist told me. She made me right there in front of her go on Amazon and buy this little shower mirror and, little shaving mirror type deal. And she said, every morning, I want you to look in the mirror and I want you to say three positive things about yourself.
Hmm.
And many days that was very tough for me because I had this very negative image of myself. If you would have told me 4 years ago that I'd be sitting in front of a camera talking to the guy who does Dansun, I would have been like, absolutely not. I'm not being in front of a camera, nor am I going to let anybody hear me talk and ramble on. But after starting to believe, after the first week of coming up with positive things about myself, I was like, hey, this really works. Whether you do it from a religious standpoint, I'm a very religious guy, so I do it from a very religious standpoint, kind of the image of God. He knows me, he loves me, that kind of thing. Or whether you just do it, just like we do with our children. You're smart, you're handsome, you're
Hmm.
all these things, and you start to believe it. So I think that was very radical for me.
You just brought up that point of you are what you believe you are, and Dr. Bruce Lipton does a lot of work on that, of research of the biology of belief, of how what you think you actually will manifest.
Hmm.
And there's actually research and science that proves that to be right. And in the book, again, I talk about a couple examples of that actually happening and reference some other books in that. But yeah, it's really incredible. And the reason that it was so difficult for you for those positive affirmations at the beginning is because, again, your brain didn't have those neural pathways in place. Your brain's like, this does not compute. I don't get it. No, this
Hmm.
is So your brain's like, no,
You're
no, no, no,
exactly
no,
right.
no, no. This does not align with our core beliefs of I'm not good enough, or I'm not worthy, or no, this goes against our programming. So it's really hard to do it. But if you do it enough times, then your brain's going to go, okay, well, now this way of thinking is better than the old way. And then again, it doesn't care if you're happy or not. But if you can, that's a perfect example of training your brain to be better. And I've done artwork on that too. Of there's this big demon walking a small paramedic on a leash, and it's a
Oh
split.
yeah,
And then there's a big
yeah,
paramedic. That's what that is. It's like, are you walking your trauma, or is your trauma walking you? So it's kind of that
yeah.
whole thing. So I just wanted to bring that up
No, and
before
I
you end the show.
love
But
that. I love that piece. I
yeah,
love that piece.
it's really
And
powerful.
and one of the other pieces to kind of get to a closing point is the one that you did that's about yourself. And I think, and I had not seen it until today, but I intend to order whatever biggest size I can get of this cherry blossom tree. You know what I mean?
Oh,
You know
yeah.
the image I'm talking about. And it's just a beautiful
Did you
tree to
look
start
close at
off
it
with.
though? Did you look?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
And like I said, you were breaking it down in this podcast I was watching.
Yeah.
And I'll link that podcast below because it's absolutely wonderful um explanation of his artwork. And as he goes through it, even some of the images that I have looked at hundreds of times, there's a demon's face in the background. You don't realize it
Hmm.
unless you're really looking at it. And I use my hands a lot to talk, and I feel like I'm off screen everywhere. It's a southern thing. It's a southern
Yeah. No,
thing.
I love it. I love it.
But I did. I got a whole lot from that, and then to find that cherry tree, it is literally such. I mean, it just hit me because I'm like, yes, that's it. Because when I look at myself, maybe not a cherry tree, I would go magnolia because I'm from Mississippi. Um, and that's our state flower. But I have really grown into something that I really enjoy personally being around. And, people laugh and say that, well, you just love yourself. And I'm like, yes,
Yeah.
yes, I do.
Yeah.
Because 6, 7 years ago, I did not love myself. I did not even know how to begin to love myself. And I think that's kind of that language is somewhat overused. Um, But that's the truth about it. I mean, once you start to actually look at yourself not as all these negative things, that's when you really begin to blossom and you really begin to grow. And that painting is just beautiful.
Yeah. And then you start attracting people. Like then you become like a
Yes,
magnet, right? Which is really
absolutely.
it works. Like it's not foo-foo-y stuff that's like, oh, think happy thoughts. So just don't be depressed, just think happy. No, there's actually science. There's science behind it that shows that this stuff work. They did a big research. They did it, one of the books many books I read that they did that's the longest research on happiness and longevity. They did it at Harvard, and it's been, I think, 85 years, like some 85 years they've been doing it now, studying generations of people on what makes them happy and what makes them have like happy longevity. The number one thing that they found is it goes into a lot of different details and examples, but its connection is one of them, is probably the biggest thing. So it's having and cultivating a meaningful connection with somebody, or two or three or four or five people, right? But meaningful connections that I call it being in your garden, right? That you fertilize, that you really cultivate throughout your life, right? And if you can learn, like you mentioned, where, okay, I've learned to kind of love myself, no matter what condition you're in. And sometimes that's really hard based on the state that you're in, especially if you're dealing with a lot of trauma. You're like in safety mode where you're just trying to get by tomorrow. It's hard to love yourself, and that's okay. But it's a transition that you can get from repair mode to growth mode. Growth mode is loving yourself. Repair mode is like, hey, I'm trying to get by to tomorrow because this trauma is taking over my brain and I need help, and that's great, and that happens. But if you can get to that growth mode where you are really cultivating meaningful relationships, you're going to attract the people in your life that are gonna come in there. It's really amazing because it happens. It's magic.
Yeah. I watched that podcast driving home just a little bit ago, and I was like, I can't wait to talk to this guy for one, but also I can't wait to give him more of my money because I saw those pictures and I was like, I gotta have that
No,
one.
Kevin,
I
no,
gotta
no,
have
no,
that
no.
one. I gotta
No,
have
I
that one.
don't. No, I don't. I don't. okay, to be honest, I'm kind of surprised that some people buy the artwork that I create because some of it's pretty messed up, some of it's pretty dark. So I know when
Yeah.
people buy my artwork on my website, they're like, and the ones that they choose to buy, I look at it. I always look at everyone. Every time someone buys something, I look, okay, what did they get? And some of it, I'm really surprised. But when I see something, some of the stuff that's really dark, I love it because I know that whoever saw that, they attached their own experience to it. Like how you
Hmm.
see that cherry blossom tree, how you've attached your own experiences to it, and that's why that artwork is meaningful to you. Which is why I love artwork. I collect art of other artists as well, and I'm more interested in why the artist created the artwork and that how the art can be a
Yeah.
catalyst for other people's. I love it. So I'm very,
Yeah.
very grateful and humbled by people that like my art enough to purchase it. Or a lot of people have even have it tattooed on their body. It's been so meaning, and that just blows my mind.
Hmm. Yeah.
So yeah, I'm, I genuinely appreciate it because it's my own stuff. It's me expressing who I am at a deep level, and that when my peers connect to it that much, man, that's a big deal to me. It really is.
Yeah. Because we get it. We see what you're explaining, and I love that.
Yeah. But see
I
that
love that.
when that makes me feel you get me too, right? Because comes from a personal space. So when you
Yeah.
connect to that artwork, then that tells me that you get me as well, and that's kind of a connection, and that makes me feel good. It's very healing.
And I also love that you're constantly, and I've heard this on, you know, obviously I had some research to do about, you know, your past, but since the artwork, I've kind of followed you. And one of the things that I love that you talk about so much, and you actually talked to me about it at the EMS conference, like we are the same. There's so much camaraderie that
Mhm.
happens
Yeah,
in this community of first responders. And I absolutely love that's the best part.
yeah.
Um,
And sometimes we don't see it.
yeah. No, you sometimes you do not, but man, hearing you say that, "Hey, I've traveled the whole world and this camaraderie, it bridges oceans." I
Hmm.
mean,
It totally
literally.
does. Yeah.
Yeah. So I just love that. So to kind of end, I always give everybody the opportunity. I know you have a podcast, you have other things going on. Tell us where all of our people, and I'll have links where you can buy the book in the show notes down below of this episode. So tell us where we can find Daniel at.
Yeah. So I have kind of I'm Dan Sun, which is the first and last three letters of my first and last name. And plus I love Karate Kid. So it's it's Dansun. I have Dansun Photos, which is the artwork. So it's dansunphotos.com. That's all artwork stuff. And then Dansun Health is kind of all the counseling therapy, the new book that I just the Unstuck book, and all the speaking stuff, the mental health component is under dansunhealth.com. So I kind of have two different branches of Dansun of the two different things that I do. So yeah, you can find me on either of those websites
Now, are you on
and
any of the
social media
social
as
media
well.
pages? Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
I got Facebook, Instagram, um,
I obviously knew the answer to that
LinkedIn.
before I asked. I follow all of them.
Yeah, yeah. So I have all of those as well. Yeah.
Yeah, well, awesome. So, guys, we always wrap up the show kind of the same way, telling you where you can find us. So you can find us Instagram, the TikTok. That's a Southern thing too. We call everything the
The
Walmart. Yeah. Um, so TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, of course, and then we also stream on, let's see, Spotify, YouTube, Amazon, few others, all the places you get your podcast. If you would just leave us a review, like our stuff so that we can continue to grow. I'm not a guy who gets wrapped up in the numbers. I don't really care about the numbers. What I care about is when I get that text message at 3 in the morning that says, I just found your stuff and I think you just saved my life.
yeah,
Um,
nothing
that
better.
is worth every bit of the work that we put into this. There are some new things coming. I know that I keep saying this. We're working with a graphic designer now to get some merchandise that you guys can purchase. But also we've started a blog on our website, asilentwarwithin.com. You can find us there. And we write about why we do this and what made us get into this podcasting environment when there's, I think the last number was like millions and millions of podcasts out there. Why do it with so much competition? And it's because of that 3 a.m. message. It's because one person will find our stuff and it will help them in a way that maybe somebody else can't. And I love that we have this almost firehouse table filled with every episode. It's always genuine conversation. So you guys continue to listen, continue to support. We're so grateful for everything that you guys are doing for us, because it has been just a magnificent ride throughout. We get to talk to a lot of cool people. I said it before, I'm kind of living a dream, getting to talk to all these people that I've looked up to for so long. So as we always end our show, you guys be safe, take care of your mind, and we'll talk soon. Bye, everybody.
You've been listening to A Silent War Within. If this episode resonated, please subscribe, leave a review, and share with someone who needs to hear it. Remember, you're not alone and your well-being matters. It's time to end this silent war.